I pulled into my driveway after a 12-hour shift, debugging software code, exhausted, and looking forward to unwinding in my own backyard. Instead, I found my father standing on my back patio, with a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard. My younger brother Derek leaned against my fence, smirking like he was watching his favorite comedy show. "Stop being selfish. Your sister's twins need a bigger yard," Dad said, gesturing around my property like he owned it. "We're listing it next week. You'll stay in the garage apartment." The realtor nodded professionally, already measuring my deck with her eyes. Derek laughed out loud, slapping his knee. That night, everything changed forever. My hands shook as I stared at the three of them discussing my home, like I wasn't even there. The realtor, a polished woman named Janet, was already taking photos of my vegetable garden and the swing set I'd built for when Amanda's kids visited. "Wait, hold on," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "This is my house. I bought this place with Grandma Rose's inheritance money 3 years ago." Dad's expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. "Gregory, your sister is going through a rough divorce. Those children need stability, and you're just one person rattling around in a 4-bedroom house." Derek pushed off from the fence, his grin widening. "Come on, Greg. The garage apartment has its own entrance and everything. You'll love the cozy space." I felt like I was drowning. My girlfriend Sarah had warned me about this exact scenario just 2 weeks ago when Amanda had started making comments about how much space I was wasting. Sarah had a sharp eye for family dynamics, having grown up with her own manipulative relatives. "Amanda's been planning something," Sarah had told me while we were cooking dinner together. "She keeps asking too many questions about your mortgage and your work schedule. Trust me, I've seen this before." I should have listened to her then. Now, watching my father and the realtor discuss listing prices, I realized how naive I'd been. Amanda had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in Dad's eyes. When she'd married her college boyfriend Tom, Dad had thrown them an expensive wedding. When she'd had the twins, Dad had renovated his own garage into a playroom for them. And when her marriage started falling apart last year, Dad had been there with emotional and financial support. But I'd never imagined she'd come for my home. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, looking directly at my father. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Amanda mentioned it a few months ago. She's been struggling since the divorce papers were filed. The twins need consistency." "A few months ago?" That would have been right around the time I'd been promoted to senior developer and started working longer hours. The same time Amanda had begun showing up unannounced, claiming she wanted to spend quality time with her favorite brother. Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, appeared at her back fence. She'd been tending her roses but was clearly listening to every word. "Excuse me, Gregory," she called out. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've noticed quite a few real estate agents walking through your yard lately. I thought you might want to know." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean lately?" Mrs. Patterson adjusted her gardening gloves, looking uncomfortable. "Well, your sister has been here several times with different people. They've been measuring things and taking pictures. I assumed you knew." Derek's laughter died abruptly. Dad shifted his weight from foot to foot, suddenly very interested in examining my tomato plants. "I didn't know about that," I said slowly. Janet, the realtor, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the logistics inside. I have some paperwork to review with all parties involved." As we walked toward my back door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Amanda's minivan was parked 3 houses down, and she was sitting in the driver's seat talking on her phone. When she saw me looking, she quickly ended the call and drove away. This wasn't a spontaneous decision by my father. This was a coordinated attack. Inside my kitchen, Janet spread out several documents on my dining table. The same table I'd inherited from Grandma Rose, along with her antique china cabinet and the money I'd used to buy this house. "Now I understand there might be some confusion about the ownership structure here." Janet began adjusting her reading glasses. "There's no confusion," I said firmly. "I own this house. My name is on the deed." Dad sat down heavily in one of my chairs. He looked older than his 62 years, his hair completely gray now, and his shoulders slumped with the weight of whatever burden he was carrying. "Son, I need to tell you something. When you were so busy with that big project at work last spring, remember how I helped you with some of the refinancing paperwork?" My heart stopped. Last spring, I'd been working 18-hour days trying to launch a new application. I'd been so overwhelmed that when Dad offered to help with the paperwork for refinancing to get a better interest rate, I'd gratefully accepted. He'd brought the documents to my office, I'd signed them quickly between meetings, and he'd handled everything else. "What about it?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "Well, Amanda helped me understand how to structure things, so it would be easier for the family long term. The refinancing made me a co-owner. It was for your own protection in case anything ever happened to you." The room spun around me. "You made yourself a co-owner of my house." It's just a legal technicality," Derek chimed in, though his earlier amusement had faded. "Dad's not trying to steal your house or anything." Janet consulted her notes. "According to the documentation I've reviewed, Mr. Robert Chen is indeed listed as a co-owner with equal rights to the property. This means the sale can proceed with his authorization alone." I stared at her, then at my father. "Your last name is Morrison, not Chen." "That's my middle name," Dad said quietly. "I legally changed my documentation for the refinancing. Amanda said it would help with some tax advantages." "Amanda?" "Of course. My sister had researched this, planned this, orchestrated every detail. She'd found a legal loophole that would let her steal my home right out from under me." Sarah arrived just as Janet was packing up her paperwork. She took one look at my face and immediately went into protective mode. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. "Gregory's just having a hard time adjusting to the new living arrangement," Derek explained. "But it's really for the best. Amanda's kids need the space more than he does." Sarah's expression could have frozen fire. "Excuse me, the new living arrangement?" I explained everything while Dad sat in uncomfortable silence and Derek fidgeted with his phone. Sarah listened without interrupting, but I could see the fury building behind her composed exterior. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Amanda manipulated your father into signing documents that made him co-owner of Gregory's house, without Gregory's knowledge or real consent. And now they're planning to sell his home and move him into the garage, so Amanda can have the main house." "It's not manipulation," Dad protested weakly. "Amanda's going through a difficult time. She needs family support." "She needs professional help," Sarah shot back. "This is theft." After Janet left with promises to start the listing process and Derek slunk away to avoid further confrontation, I sat alone with my father in my kitchen. The kitchen where I'd learned to cook Grandma Rose's recipes, where Sarah and I had planned our future together, where I'd imagined someday teaching my own children to bake cookies. "Dad, how could you do this to me?" He broke down, then tears streaming down his weathered face. "She said she'd never let me see the grandkids again. She said Tom was planning to move them to California after the divorce, and this was the only way to keep the family together. I thought I was protecting everyone. By stealing my home, I never meant for it to go this far. Amanda said it was just paperwork, just in case. But then her lawyer bills started piling up, and the divorce settlement wasn't as much as she'd hoped, and she started talking about how unfair it was that you had so much space while her children were cramped in that apartment. I felt hollow inside. My own father had betrayed me for my sister's manipulation. The man who'd taught me about integrity and standing up for what's right had signed away my security without a second thought. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know, son. I honestly don't know." The next morning, I called my friend Marcus, who worked as a real estate attorney downtown. We'd gone to college together, and he'd helped me with the original purchase of my house. If anyone could find a way out of this nightmare, it would be Marcus. "Gregory, I'm looking at these documents right now, and I have to tell you, this is bad," Marcus said over the phone. His usually cheerful voice was grim. Your father's signature is legitimate, and the refinancing documents clearly establish joint ownership. From a legal standpoint, he has every right to sell. I slumped in my office chair, grateful that my coworkers couldn't see my face. There has to be something. Some kind of fraud protection or cooling off period. The problem is timing. This refinancing happened 8 months ago. If you were going to challenge it based on fraud or coercion, you needed to do it much sooner. The fact that you made mortgage payments under this arrangement for 8 months makes it look like you accepted the new ownership structure. 8 months. I thought back to last spring, trying to remember the exact circumstances. I'd been so focused on the product launch that everything else had been a blur. Dad had presented the refinancing as a simple interest rate reduction, and I trusted him completely. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any way to fight this? There was a long pause. Legally, it's going to be extremely difficult. Your father has clear ownership rights and he's exercising them. However, there might be some other angles we can explore. What kind of angles? Waijiawa. Well, if we can prove that your sister orchestrated this through deception, or that there was some kind of undue influence on your father, we might have grounds for a lawsuit. But that's a long, expensive process with no guarantee of success. I hung up feeling more defeated than ever. My own family had outmaneuvered me using legal tactics I'd never seen coming. That evening, Sarah came over with a bottle of wine and a stack of legal pads. "We're going to figure this out," she said, settling onto my couch. "Tell me everything again, but this time I want details. Every conversation, every document, every interaction you remember." As we went through the timeline, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Amanda's visits had increased dramatically after Dad helped with the refinancing. She'd started asking pointed questions about my work schedule, my finances, my relationship with Sarah. She'd begun bringing her kids over more frequently always, when I wasn't home, claiming she wanted them to get used to the house. She's been planning this for months, Sarah realized. She knew exactly what she was doing when she suggested that refinancing to your father. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Amanda wants to meet tomorrow to discuss the transition. She's being really reasonable about everything. Thinks you'll be happier with less responsibility." "Don't respond to that," Sarah advised. "We need to gather more information first." The next day, I decided to visit Mrs. Patterson. As my neighbor for 3 years, she'd seen more of Amanda's recent activities than anyone else. "Oh, Gregory, I'm so glad you came by," Mrs. Patterson said, inviting me into her immaculate living room. "I've been worried about all the strange goings-on at your place." She served me sweet tea and homemade cookies while explaining what she'd observed. Amanda had been bringing different people to my house for weeks, always when my car wasn't in the driveway. They'd measured the yard, taken photos of every room, and discussed renovation plans. "She told me she was surprising you with some home improvements," Mrs. Patterson explained. But something about her manner seemed off. She was too secretive, too controlling of the conversation. Mrs. Patterson had also overheard phone conversations Amanda had while standing in my backyard. She kept talking about timelines and deadlines, saying things like he has no idea, and Dad will do whatever I tell him. Most disturbing of all, Mrs. Patterson had security cameras that covered part of my property. "I installed them after those break-ins last year," she explained. "I hope you don't mind, but they've captured quite a bit of activity at your house lately." The footage she showed me was devastating. Amanda had been entering my house with her own key, which I'd given her for emergencies. She'd been bringing her children inside, taking photos of them in my living room, my kitchen, even my bedroom. She'd also been there with at least 3 different real estate agents, giving them full tours and discussing market value. "When was this?" I asked, pointing to a particularly clear shot of Amanda handing paperwork to a man in a suit. 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, you would have been at work." 2 weeks ago, before Dad had even told me about the sale. Amanda had been shopping for realtors and getting market assessments while I was completely in the dark. But the most damning footage came from a conversation between Amanda and Derek in my backyard. The camera had captured audio as well as video, and their words made my blood boil. "Greg's too trusting for his own good," Amanda was saying. "He'll never see this coming until it's too late to stop it." "Are you sure Dad will go through with it?" Derek asked. "Dad will do whatever I tell him. He's too guilty about my divorce and too worried about losing access to his grandchildren. Besides, I've already shown him how much money Gregory is wasting by keeping this big house all to himself." "What if he fights back?" Amanda laughed a cold sound that sent chills down my spine. "With what I've made sure all the legal documentation is airtight. By the time he understands what's happening, the house will already be under contract." I thanked Mrs. Patterson and asked for copies of all the footage. This was evidence of premeditation, of deliberate deception. Maybe it wasn't enough to save my house, but it was certainly enough to expose Amanda's true character to the family. When I got home, there was a luxury sedan in my driveway. Through my kitchen window, I could see Amanda sitting at my dining table going through papers with yet another real estate agent. They were discussing staging strategies and optimal listing prices. In my own home, using my own key, without my permission. I walked in through my front door, and both women looked up in surprise. "Gregory?" Amanda exclaimed, her voice artificially bright. "Perfect timing. This is Jennifer from Premier Properties. She has some wonderful ideas for presenting the house to potential buyers." Jennifer, a polished woman in her 40s, extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Morrison. Your sister has told me so much about your family's situation. I think we can get you an excellent price in this market." "I haven't agreed to sell," I said quietly. Amanda waved dismissively. "Dad explained everything to me. You're just having some natural anxiety about change. But once you see how much happier everyone will be with the new arrangement, you'll wonder why we waited so long." "Amanda, can I speak with you privately?" Jennifer gathered her materials. "I'll wait in my car while you two discuss things. Amanda, I'll have the listing agreement ready for signatures tomorrow." Once we were alone, Amanda's demeanor shifted slightly. The artificial sweetness remained, but there was steel underneath it now. "I know what you're thinking," she said before I could speak. "You're thinking this isn't fair, that you're being pushed around. But you need to consider the bigger picture, Gregory. Those children have been through a traumatic divorce. They need stability, consistency, a real home where they can grow up safely. They can have that in your apartment or in any number of houses you could buy with your divorce settlement." "My settlement barely covers our basic expenses. Tom hid assets, and his lawyer was better than mine. I'm struggling just to keep us afloat." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Mrs. Patterson's videos. "This is you 2 weeks ago telling Derek that Dad would do whatever you told him because you'd manipulated his guilt about your situation." Amanda's face went completely blank for a moment. Then she smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson's getting old, Gregory. Those cameras probably don't have very clear audio. And even if they did, what exactly do you think you're proving? That I convinced Dad to help me provide a better life for his grandchildren? That's called family loyalty. It's called theft. It's called sacrifice. Something you've never understood. You've always been Dad's favorite, the successful one, with the steady job and the nice girlfriend. You've never had to struggle, never had to worry about anything beyond your own comfort. Meanwhile, I'm a single mother, trying to rebuild my life after my husband abandoned us." The worst part was that she almost sounded sincere. Amanda had always been gifted at rewriting history to cast herself as the victim and everyone else as either saviors or villains. "I'm not giving up my house," I told her. "You don't have a choice," she replied calmly. "The paperwork is already in motion. Jennifer will have everything ready tomorrow and we'll be accepting offers by the weekend. You should use this time to start packing instead of fighting the inevitable." After she left, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what was happening. My sister had been planning this takeover for months, manipulating our father, and using legal loopholes to steal my home. She'd been gathering intelligence, hiring professionals, and setting everything in motion while treating me like a fool. Sarah found me there an hour later, staring at the same cup of coffee I'd poured when Amanda arrived. "How bad is it?" she asked, taking the seat across from me. "She's got everything planned out. Multiple real estate agents, market assessments, even staging strategies. She's been treating this like a business acquisition." "What about the video evidence?" She dismissed it, called Mrs. Patterson old and unreliable. Sarah took my hands across the table. "Gregory, I need to tell you something. I've been doing some research on Amanda's financial situation, and there are some things that don't add up." She pulled out her laptop and showed me several public records she'd accessed through her job in corporate accounting. Amanda's divorce settlement had actually been quite substantial. She'd received a lump sum payment, monthly alimony, and child support that should have been more than enough to rent or even buy a nice house. "So where did the money go?" I asked. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. But I did find some interesting court documents. Amanda's ex-husband filed a motion claiming she was hiding assets and manipulating financial records during their divorce proceedings. The pattern was becoming clearer. Amanda hadn't lost money in her divorce. She'd hidden it or spent it in ways that would make her appear financially desperate. She'd created a crisis that required family intervention, knowing that Dad would do anything to help his daughter and grandchildren. "There's more," Sarah continued. "I found records of several credit cards and loans taken out in the past year. She's been borrowing against future income, probably assuming she'd be able to pay everything back once she got your house." My phone rang. It was Derek. "Hey, Greg, I've been thinking about everything that happened yesterday, and I need to tell you something. Amanda made me promise not to say anything, but I can't keep it secret anymore." "What is it?" "She's been lying to all of us. About the divorce, about her finances, about everything. She got way more money than she told Dad, and she's been using it to pay for lawyers and private investigators to research you." My heart sank. "Research me how?" "Your work schedule, your finances, your relationship with Sarah, even your social media activity. She hired people to build a complete profile of your life so she could time this whole thing perfectly." "Derek, why are you telling me this now?" There was a long pause. "Because I just found out she's been stealing from Dad, too. She's been using his credit cards and forging his signature on loans, and she threatened to pin it all on me if I didn't help her with the house thing." The scope of Amanda's deception was staggering. She hadn't just targeted my home. She'd been systematically manipulating and stealing from our entire family while presenting herself as a struggling victim who needed rescue. "Derek, I need you to write down everything you know. Every conversation, every threat, every lie you've witnessed. Can you do that?" "Yeah, I can do that. Greg, I'm really sorry. I should have told you sooner, but she said she'd make sure I went to jail if I crossed her." After hanging up, Sarah and I looked at each other across my kitchen table. We finally understood what we were really dealing with. Amanda wasn't just a sister who felt entitled to my house. She was a criminal who'd been planning and executing a sophisticated fraud scheme against her own family. "What do we do now?" I asked. Sarah's expression was determined. "We fight back." The next morning brought a devastating revelation that made everything we'd discovered seem small in comparison. My phone was buzzing with angry calls from extended family members, all of them furious with me for reasons I couldn't understand. The first call was from my Aunt Helen Dad's sister, who launched into a tirade the moment I answered. "Gregory Morrison, I cannot believe what your sister told me about how you've been treating those precious children," she snapped, "threatening to throw them out of the house during their visits, making them sleep on the floor. What kind of monster have you become?" "Aunt Helen, what are you talking about? I've never threatened Amanda's kids. They've only been to my house a handful of times, and I've always been kind to them." "Don't you dare lie to me. Amanda showed me the text messages. Horrible, cruel things you wrote about those innocent babies, and she has pictures of them crying after you yelled at them." My stomach dropped. "What pictures? When did this supposedly happen?" 2 weeks ago when Amanda brought them over to see their grandfather. She said you came home early and screamed at them for being in your house, told them they were unwelcome brats who were ruining your life. 2 weeks ago, I'd been in back-to-back meetings until 8 in the evening, then had dinner with Sarah until nearly midnight. I'd never even seen Amanda or her children that day. Aunt Helen, I can prove I wasn't home that day. I have receipts from dinner witnesses who were with me. Amanda warned me you'd try to make excuses. She said you'd lie about everything to cover up your cruelty. The call ended with Aunt Helen declaring that she'd never speak to me again until I apologized to those children and changed my selfish attitude. 3 more calls followed with similar themes. My cousin Paul accused me of stealing Grandma Rose's jewelry and selling it to pay for expensive vacations. My Uncle Frank berated me for calling Amanda worthless and threatening to have her children taken away by social services. My cousin Sarah claimed I'd told Dad that he was an embarrassment to the family, and that Amanda's children weren't really his grandchildren. None of these incidents had ever happened. Amanda had created an entire fictional narrative about my behavior, complete with forged evidence and fabricated witness accounts. She'd systematically contacted every member of our extended family with detailed stories about my supposed cruelty and selfishness. But the most shocking call came from my Uncle Paul, who worked as a detective with the local police department. Gregory, I've known you since you were a baby, and I never would have believed you capable of this kind of behavior, he said. But Amanda has documentation, photos, text messages, even voice recordings of you threatening those children. Uncle Paul, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I have never threatened Amanda's children. I have never sent her cruel text messages. And I certainly have never made voice recordings saying horrible things about kids. Someone is lying to you. She played me one of the recordings, Gregory. It was your voice clear as day, calling those children terrible names and saying they deserved to suffer for their mother's mistakes. My blood ran cold. A voice recording that sounded like me but contained words I'd never spoken could only mean one thing: Amanda had hired professionals to create fake evidence. Uncle Paul, I know this sounds crazy, but I think Amanda has been fabricating evidence against me. Would you be willing to have that recording analyzed by the police lab? There was a long pause. Son, are you seriously suggesting your sister hired someone to fake audio recordings? I'm suggesting that something very strange is going on, and I'd like help getting to the truth. Uncle Paul agreed to have the recording examined, though he clearly thought I was grasping at straws. But his willingness to investigate gave me hope that at least one family member might be open to evidence that contradicted Amanda's narrative. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door with a concerned expression and a manila envelope in her hands. Gregory, I'm afraid I have more bad news. Amanda came to visit me this morning, and she had some very troubling things to say about recent events at your house. My heart sank. What did she tell you? She said you'd been having loud arguments with your girlfriend about money and that you'd been drinking heavily and becoming violent. She showed me photos of broken dishes in your kitchen and claimed you'd thrown them at the walls during a fight. I stared at Mrs. Patterson in shock. My dishes aren't broken. My kitchen is fine. And I rarely drink, certainly not to excess. I told her that didn't sound like the Gregory I knew, but she seemed so genuinely worried about your mental state. She suggested I should be careful about spending time alone with you. Mrs. Patterson opened the envelope and showed me printouts of photos that had clearly been taken inside my house. They showed broken plates and glasses scattered across my kitchen floor, overturned furniture in my living room, and what appeared to be alcohol bottles scattered around my coffee table. When were these supposedly taken? I asked. Yesterday evening, according to Amanda. She said she came to check on you after your father told her about your angry reaction to the house sale. Yesterday evening, Sarah and I had been at her apartment working on our investigation into Amanda's finances. We'd been there from 6 until nearly midnight, and several of Sarah's roommates could verify our presence. Mrs. Patterson, would you mind coming inside to see my kitchen? We walked through my house together, and Mrs. Patterson gasped when she saw my kitchen. Every dish was in its proper place. Nothing was broken, and there wasn't a single alcohol bottle anywhere in sight. But how is this possible? These photos clearly show your kitchen in complete disarray. I thought about the videos Mrs. Patterson had captured of Amanda inside my house with various professionals. Mrs. Patterson, I think Amanda staged these photos in someone else's kitchen that looked similar to mine. Or she hired someone to digitally alter images of my actual kitchen. The scope of Amanda's deception was breathtaking. She hadn't just been planning to steal my house. She'd been systematically destroying my reputation within the family to ensure that no one would side with me when the truth came out. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Emergency family meeting at Dad's house tonight. Everyone will be there. Amanda says it's time to confront you about your behavior and get you the help you need. This was it. Amanda was calling in the entire family for a coordinated confrontation based on lies she'd been spreading for weeks. She was planning to have me declared mentally unstable or dangerous, which would make it even easier to justify taking my house. Sarah arrived just as I was trying to figure out how to handle the family meeting. "I've got more information," she said grimly. I contacted Amanda's ex-husband Tom through LinkedIn. He agreed to talk to me about their divorce. What did he say? Gregory, she did the exact same thing to him. Created fake evidence, manipulated family members, even hired investigators to build a case against him. He only escaped financial ruin because his lawyer was smarter than Amanda's and caught her in several lies. Sarah pulled out her laptop and showed me screenshots of a conversation she'd had with Tom. According to him, Amanda has done this before. She targeted her college roommate's trust fund, her first boyfriend's inheritance, even her own grandmother's savings before she passed away. It's a pattern of behavior. Did he have any advice for dealing with her? He said the only thing that worked was exposing her publicly in front of witnesses with undeniable proof of her lies. He said she's brilliant at manipulating people one-on-one or in small groups, but she falls apart when confronted with evidence in front of multiple people. So we need to turn tonight's family meeting into our own confrontation. Exactly, and I think I know how to do it. Sarah had been busy gathering evidence all day. She'd contacted Marcus, who had agreed to research the legal documents Amanda had used to manipulate the refinancing. She'd reached out to several of the real estate agents Amanda had been working with, posing as a potential client interested in the same property. And she'd been in touch with a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. The pieces are falling into place, Sarah explained. Marcus found irregularities in the refinancing documents that suggest forgery. 2 of the real estate agents admitted that Amanda had been shopping your house around for over a month before your father was supposedly involved. And the private investigator found evidence that Amanda has been using multiple fake identities to take out loans and credit cards. As the evening approached, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. Tonight would either expose Amanda's lies and save my house, or it would be the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family. We arrived at Dad's house to find cars lined up along the street. Aunt Helen, Uncle Frank, Uncle Paul, and several cousins were all there along with Derek and Amanda. The living room was set up like a formal intervention with Amanda sitting in the center chair and everyone else arranged in a circle around the room. Gregory consistendy. Dad said as we entered, "We're all here because we love you and we're worried about your recent behavior." Amanda's eyes glittered with triumph. She was wearing her most innocent expression, the same look she'd perfected as a child, whenever she'd gotten me in trouble for things I hadn't done. Before we begin, I said I'd like everyone to see something. I pulled out Mrs. Patterson's tablet and played the security footage of Amanda and Derek discussing their manipulation of Dad and their plans to steal my house. The room fell silent as they heard Amanda's voice clearly stating that Dad would do whatever she told him and that I would never see the theft coming until it was too late. "That's taken completely out of context," Amanda said quickly, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "Really?" Sarah asked, stepping forward with her own evidence. "Because we also have documentation showing that you've been working with real estate agents for over a month, that you've been using fake financial information to make yourself appear desperate, and that you've been systematically lying to family members about Gregory's behavior. Uncle Paul leaned forward, his detective instincts finally kicking in. Amanda, I had that voice recording you gave me analyzed. It was digitally altered. Someone took Gregory's voice from other sources and spliced together words he never said in that order. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Aunt Helen looked confused and betrayed, while Uncle Frank stared at Amanda like he was seeing her for the first time. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we have testimony from your ex-husband confirming that you've used these exact same manipulation tactics before. And we have evidence that you've been committing financial fraud against multiple family members. Derek stood up suddenly. I can't do this anymore. Amanda, tell them the truth. Tell them how you threatened to frame me for stealing from Dad if I didn't help you lie about Gregory. Amanda's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, but she made one last desperate attempt to regain control. You're all being manipulated by Gregory and his girlfriend, she said, her voice rising. They've probably faked all of this evidence to make me look bad. Gregory has always been jealous of the attention I get from Dad, and now he's trying to turn everyone against me. But it was too late. The room full of family members had seen too much evidence and heard too many inconsistencies. Uncle Paul stood up and walked toward Amanda with the expression he usually reserved for suspects he was about to arrest. Amanda, I think we need to have a serious conversation about some of the financial irregularities Sarah mentioned. Specifically about the credit cards and loans that have been taken out in Dad's name. Amanda's face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Uncle Paul replied grimly, and I think it's time for the truth. The confrontation at Dad's house had shattered Amanda's web of lies, but the legal reality of my situation remained unchanged. Even with her deception exposed, the refinancing documents were still valid, and Dad was still listed as co-owner of my house. Amanda might have been publicly humiliated, but she hadn't been defeated. That realization hit me hard as I sat in my home office the following morning, staring at a stack of bills and legal documents. Sarah had stayed over, and I could hear her on the phone in the kitchen talking to Marcus about our legal options. The fraud charges will take months to sort out, she was saying, and even if Amanda goes to jail, that doesn't automatically reverse the property ownership issue. I turned my attention to the task I'd been avoiding, going through Grandma Rose's personal belongings that I'd stored in my basement after her funeral. If I was going to lose the house, I needed to make sure her precious items were safely preserved. Grandma Rose had been the cornerstone of our family, the one person who could see through Amanda's manipulation and call her out on her behavior. She'd left me her house money specifically because she knew I'd use it responsibly, and she'd made Dad promise to never interfere with her wishes. As I sorted through boxes of photo albums, handmade quilts, and antique books, I found myself wishing desperately that she was still alive to help navigate this crisis. That's when I discovered the sealed envelope. It was tucked inside Grandma Rose's old desk, taped to the bottom of a drawer I'd never fully emptied. The envelope was addressed to me in her distinctive handwriting, with instructions that it should only be opened if family circumstances required additional protection. Inside was a letter dated just 2 months before her death, along with several legal documents that made my hands shake as I read them. My dear Gregory, the letter began, if you are reading this, then someone in our family has probably tried to take advantage of your trusting nature. I have watched Amanda's behavior for many years, and I know that her sense of entitlement will eventually lead her to target the inheritance I left you. Grandma Rose had been far more perceptive than any of us realized. She'd anticipated Amanda's eventual attack on my security and had taken steps to protect me. The legal documents revealed that Grandma Rose had secretly purchased a second property shortly before her death, a lakefront cabin in the mountains about 2 hours from the city. The property was held in a trust that named me as the sole beneficiary with ironclad legal protections that prevented any family member from claiming ownership or forcing a sale. But the most important document was a codicil to her will that I'd never seen before. In it, Grandma Rose explicitly stated that the money she'd left me for a house purchase was intended to provide me with permanent, unassailable security. The codicil included specific language protecting that gift from any future family interference, including manipulation of legal documents or fraudulent claims of ownership. If anyone in the family attempts to deprive Gregory of his rightful property through deception, coercion, or legal manipulation, the codicil read, then the lakefront property should be used as evidence that I intended Gregory to have complete and permanent housing security free from family interference. I called Marcus immediately. "Gregory, this changes everything," he said after I read him the relevant passages. "Your grandmother's codicil establishes clear intent that your house purchase was meant to be protected from family manipulation. Combined with the evidence of fraud surrounding the refinancing, we can argue that the co-ownership arrangement violates the terms of your inheritance." What does that mean practically? It means we can file an emergency injunction to stop the house sale while we sort out the legal issues, and the lakefront property gives you significant leverage in any negotiation. I asked Marcus to research the cabin's current value. When he called back an hour later, his voice was filled with amazement. "Gregory, this property is worth almost twice what your current house is worth. It's on premium lakefront land that's been zoned for development. Your grandmother essentially left you a fortune." The irony was staggering. While Amanda had been scheming to steal my modest house, I'd been sitting on a much more valuable property that she didn't even know existed. Grandma Rose had outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. But as I was processing this incredible revelation, Sarah burst into my office with her laptop and a stack of printed documents. "Gregory, you need to see this immediately. I've been digging deeper into Amanda's finances, and what I found is criminal." She spread the documents across my desk, showing bank records, credit applications, and loan agreements that painted a disturbing picture of Amanda's activities over the past year. "She's been systematically stealing from your father," Sarah explained. "Credit cards opened in his name, loans taken out against his retirement account, even a reverse mortgage on his house that he probably doesn't know about. The documentation showed that Amanda had stolen nearly $50,000 from Dad over the course of 8 months. She'd used sophisticated identity theft techniques, forged signatures, and manipulated bank representatives to gain access to his accounts. But that's not the worst part," Sarah continued. "Look at what she's been spending the money on." The credit card statements revealed payments to private investigation firms, legal consulting services, and something called reputation management solutions. Amanda had been using stolen money to fund her campaign against me. She hired professionals to create the fake evidence, Sarah explained. The voice recordings, the doctored photos, even the fake text message conversations. This wasn't amateur manipulation. This was a sophisticated fraud operation. My phone rang. It was Derek, and he sounded panicked. "Greg, you need to get over to Dad's house right now. Amanda's here with some scary-looking guys, and they're demanding money. Dad's locked himself in his bedroom, and I think Amanda's going to do something desperate." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, but Sarah caught my arm. "Wait. If Amanda's desperate enough to bring dangerous people to your father's house, she's not going to stop there. We need backup." She called Uncle Paul while I called Marcus. Within minutes, we had a plan. Uncle Paul would meet us at Dad's house with backup officers, while Marcus would file emergency protective orders to prevent Amanda from accessing any more family assets. When we arrived at Dad's house, the scene was chaotic. 2 large men in expensive suits were standing on the front porch, while Amanda paced back and forth in the yard, talking rapidly on her phone. She was gesticulating wildly, her voice rising to near hysteria. Derek met us at the curb, his face pale with fear. "She owes these guys a lot of money," he whispered. "They came to collect, and when Dad couldn't pay, Amanda started screaming, that it was all your fault for interfering with her plans. Uncle Paul arrived with 2 patrol cars just as Amanda noticed our presence. Her expression shifted from panic to rage as she saw me getting out of Sarah's car. "This is all your fault," she screamed, running toward me. "I had everything planned perfectly until you started meddling. Now my children are going to suffer because of your selfishness." One of the men on the porch stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to discuss your payment arrangements. These family issues aren't our concern." "I'll have your money as soon as the house sells," Amanda snapped at him. "My brother is being unreasonable about a simple family arrangement." "Actually," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to discuss those family arrangements myself." I pulled out the legal documents from Grandma Rose's hidden envelope and handed copies to Uncle Paul, Derek, and even Amanda. "It turns out Grandma Rose anticipated this exact situation," I announced. "Not only did she leave specific legal protections against family members trying to steal my house, but she also left me a second property worth significantly more than this one." Amanda snatched the documents and read them frantically, her face growing paler with each page. "This is impossible," she muttered. "I researched everything. I planned for every contingency." "Apparently you didn't plan for Grandma Rose being smarter than you," Uncle Paul observed dryly. The men on the porch were growing impatient. "Ma'am, we need payment arrangements today, not family drama." "How much does she owe you?" I asked them directly. $37,500, one of them replied, "plus interest and fees that accrue daily." I looked at Amanda, who was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. "Here's my offer," I said. "I'll pay your debt in full today in exchange for you signing documents that relinquish any claim to my house, Dad's house, or any other family property. You'll also agree to enter a treatment program for your financial and psychological issues." "And if I refuse?" Uncle Paul stepped forward. "Then you'll be arrested for fraud, identity theft, extortion, and elder abuse. I have enough evidence to put you in prison for several years." Amanda looked around at the circle of family members, police officers, and creditors surrounding her. Her carefully constructed plans had collapsed completely, and she was facing the consequences of months of criminal behavior. "What kind of treatment program?" she asked quietly. "Residential facility, 90 days minimum," Sarah replied, "with financial counseling, psychological evaluation, and supervised reintegration afterward." "And my children?" "Will stay with Dad and me," Derek said firmly, "in the garage apartment where there's plenty of room for all of us to live together safely." Amanda stared at the documents in her hands for a long moment. The legal protections Grandma Rose had put in place were airtight, and the evidence of Amanda's crimes was overwhelming. She had no choice but to accept the deal. "Where do I sign?" she asked. 3 days later, I stood in my backyard looking out at the space Amanda had tried to steal from me. The realtor signs were gone, the sale had been canceled, and the legal documents restoring my full ownership had been filed. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Amanda had agreed to enter the treatment program, but her creditors weren't the only people she owed money to. According to Sarah's investigation, there were at least 3 other individuals who had lent Amanda significant amounts based on her promises to repay them once she got my house. More troubling was the discovery that Amanda had been telling these creditors that I was her business partner in a real estate investment scheme. She'd shown them fake contracts and forged agreements that made it appear I was legally obligated to pay her debts if she defaulted. "We need to get ahead of this," Marcus advised during an emergency meeting at his office. "If these people believe they have legitimate claims against you, they might try to pursue collection actions before they learn the truth." That's when Sarah proposed an idea that was both brilliant and terrifying. Instead of waiting for Amanda's other schemes to surface, we should gather everyone together and expose all of her lies simultaneously. "She's been manipulating people in isolation," Sarah explained. "Each creditor, each family member, each professional she's worked with only knows part of the story. If we bring them all together and show them the complete picture, her house of cards will collapse all at once." Marcus was intrigued but cautious. That's a risky strategy. If it backfires, you could end up facing multiple lawsuits simultaneously. But if it works, I added, we can resolve everything at once and prevent Amanda from continuing to use my name and reputation to defraud people. Uncle Paul, who had been investigating Amanda's crimes, supported the idea. From a law enforcement perspective, having all the victims and witnesses together would help us build a comprehensive case, and it would prevent Amanda from spinning different stories to different people. We decided to organize what we called a truth meeting at my house, inviting everyone who had been affected by Amanda's deception. The guest list was extensive: family members, creditors, real estate agents, the private investigators Amanda had hired, and even some of her ex-husband's relatives who had been drawn into her schemes. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon under the pretense of a family gathering to clear the air about recent events. Amanda, who was scheduled to enter the treatment facility on Monday, agreed to attend, probably hoping to make one last attempt at damage control. Mrs. Patterson offered to help with preparations, and her enthusiasm for the project was infectious. "That girl has been lying to everyone for months," she said as we arranged chairs in my living room. "It's time for people to see who she really is." On Saturday morning, people began arriving early. Tom, Amanda's ex-husband, came with detailed documentation of her previous fraudulent schemes. The private investigators brought records of what Amanda had actually asked them to do versus what she'd told family members. The creditors arrived with copies of the false contracts and fake agreements Amanda had shown them. Marcus had prepared a comprehensive presentation that would walk through Amanda's various deceptions in chronological order, showing how each lie built upon previous ones to create an intricate web of fraud. Sarah had created visual aids that would help people understand the scope of Amanda's manipulation: timeline charts, financial flow diagrams, and relationship maps showing how she'd exploited connections between different groups of people. When Amanda arrived, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. The gathering was much larger than she'd expected, and many of the faces were unfamiliar to her. "Gregory, what is this?" she asked, looking around nervously. "This is everyone you've been lying to," I replied calmly. We thought it was time for them to meet each other and compare notes. Amanda's face went white as she recognized her various creditors, the real estate agents she'd misled, and the private investigators she'd hired to spy on me. She started backing toward the door, but Uncle Paul was standing there in his official capacity as a police officer. "I think you should stay," he suggested firmly. "There are some people here who have questions for you." Marcus began his presentation by explaining the basic facts Amanda had used: forged documents to gain partial ownership of my house, had stolen money from our father to fund her schemes, and had created fake evidence to manipulate family members. "But that's just the beginning," he continued. "Over the past 6 months, Amanda has been running multiple fraud schemes simultaneously using different lies with different groups of people." He showed the crowd copies of the contracts Amanda had shown her creditors, claiming that I was her business partner and would be responsible for her debts. Then he showed the real estate documents where she'd listed herself as the sole owner of my property. Finally, he showed the fake evidence she'd created to convince family members that I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. In each case, Marcus explained Amanda told people what they needed to hear to get what she wanted from them. She told creditors that Gregory was wealthy and legally obligated to pay her debts. She told real estate agents that the property was hers to sell. She told family members that Gregory was dangerous and needed to be controlled. One by one, the people Amanda had deceived began sharing their experiences. The pattern that emerged was chilling in its consistency and sophistication. "She showed me legal documents proving her brother was her business partner," said one creditor. "When I asked to speak with him directly, she said he was too busy with work, but that she had full authority to negotiate on his behalf. She brought me detailed financial statements showing the property value and her ownership percentage," said one of the real estate agents. "Everything looked legitimate, and she seemed very knowledgeable about the market. She had recordings of Gregory saying terrible things about children, said Aunt Helen, looking confused and betrayed. How could those be fake? Sarah stood up to answer that question. Amanda hired a company that specializes in creating fake audio evidence. They took samples of Gregory's voice from social media videos and spliced together words he never said in that order. She played side-by-side comparisons of my actual voice and the manipulated recordings. The differences were subtle, but detectable, and the technology used to create them was clearly sophisticated. Amanda had remained silent during most of the presentation, but as the evidence mounted and the crowd's anger became palpable, she finally spoke up. "You're all making this sound much worse than it actually is," she said, her voice shaking. "I was desperate to provide for my children. I made some bad decisions, but I never meant to hurt anyone." "You stole $50,000 from your own father," Derek said angrily. "You tried to make everyone believe Gregory was mentally ill. You endangered children by borrowing money from dangerous people. How is that not hurting anyone? And you dragged my family into your schemes," Tom added. "You told people my relatives had agreed to co-sign loans for you. You used my children's photos to manipulate sympathy from strangers." The crowd was growing increasingly hostile, and I could see that Amanda was beginning to panic. But then something unexpected happened that changed the entire dynamic of the meeting. A woman I didn't recognize stood up from the back of the room. "Excuse me," she said in a calm, professional voice. "My name is Detective Linda Santos, and I've been investigating financial crimes in this area for the past 3 months. I believe Ms. Morrison may have information relevant to a much larger case we're working on." Amanda went completely rigid. "I don't know what you're talking about." Detective Santos opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. "These are surveillance photos of you meeting with Marcus Chen, who runs a document forgery operation. We believe you purchased fake contracts and fraudulent identification materials from his organization." The room fell completely silent. Amanda's fraud wasn't just a family matter. It was part of a larger criminal enterprise. "Ms. Morrison." Detective Santos continued, "You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." As Amanda was handcuffed and read her rights, the crowd of people she'd deceived watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just about a family dispute over a house anymore. It was about organized crime and systematic fraud that had affected dozens of victims. Uncle Paul stepped forward to help process the arrest, while Marcus began collecting statements from all the people Amanda had defrauded. "This is probably going to be a very long legal process," he warned me, "but at least now we know the full scope of what we're dealing with." As Amanda was led away in handcuffs, she turned back to look at me one last time. The expression on her face wasn't anger or hatred. It was something much more disturbing. It was calculation, as if she was already planning her next move. "This isn't over, Gregory," she said quietly. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Detective Santos's arrest of Amanda had opened a floodgate of revelations that none of us were prepared for. As the investigation into the document forgery ring expanded, we discovered that Amanda's crimes were far more extensive and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The call that changed everything came on Tuesday morning, 3 days after Amanda's arrest. I was at work, trying to focus on a software project when Detective Santos called my direct line. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to come to the station immediately. We've uncovered something about your sister's activities that requires immediate action to protect children's safety." When I arrived at the police station, I found Detective Santos waiting with a child protective services worker named Maria Gonzalez and a stack of documents that made my stomach turn. "Mr. Morrison, we've discovered that your sister has been using her children as collateral for some of her loans," Detective Santos explained. "She borrowed money from individuals who specialize in human trafficking, and she signed agreements that would give them custody of her children if she defaulted on payments. I stared at them in disbelief. She used her own children as collateral. Maria Gonzalez nodded grimly. The contracts we found specified that if Ms. Morrison failed to repay certain debts, the lenders would have the right to collect alternative assets of equivalent value. The language is deliberately vague, but the intent is clear. How is that legal? It's not, Detective Santos replied. These are criminal organizations that prey on desperate parents. They structure the loans to look legitimate on the surface, but the real terms are buried in complex legal language that most people don't understand. The implications were staggering. Amanda hadn't just been stealing money and manipulating family members, she'd been putting her own children in danger from human traffickers. Where are the children now? I asked. They're in emergency protective custody, Maria explained. We removed them from their temporary placement with your father this morning when we discovered the extent of the danger they're in. My heart broke thinking about 6-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Jake, innocent children, who had no idea their mother had essentially sold them to criminals to fund her schemes. What happens next? We need to place them with family members who can provide immediate safety and long-term stability, Maria continued. Your father is elderly and may not be able to protect them if these criminals come looking for them. We understand you have a stable home and a strong support system. Detective Santos leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, these people Amanda borrowed from are extremely dangerous. They've been tracking your family's activities and they consider the children to be their property now. We need to move fast to establish legal protection. The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, background checks, and emergency court hearings. Sarah took time off work to help with the process, and Marcus worked with family court attorneys to establish emergency guardianship. By evening, Emma and Jake were in my house, sleeping in the spare bedrooms I'd set up with furniture donated by Mrs. Patterson and other neighbors. The children were confused and scared, but they seemed to trust me based on their limited previous interactions during family visits. Uncle Greg, why can't we go home to Mommy? Emma asked as I tucked her into bed. Mommy made some mistakes and needs to spend some time learning how to fix them, I explained gently. But you're safe here, and we're going to take very good care of you. Will the bad men come to get us? Jake whispered, his eyes wide with fear. No, sweetie. The police are making sure no bad men can find you, and I'm going to protect you no matter what. The reality of my new responsibility was overwhelming, but it was also clarifying. These children needed stability, safety, and love. Everything else was secondary. Over the next few days, more details emerged about Amanda's involvement with the criminal organization. Detective Santos explained that the document forgery ring was just one part of a larger operation that included identity theft, money laundering, and human trafficking. Your sister was recruited about 8 months ago, she explained during one of our regular briefings. They targeted her specifically because of her family connections and her desperate financial situation. How did they know about our family? Social media surveillance, public records research, even physical surveillance of your daily routines. These organizations are very sophisticated in how they identify and recruit victims. The traffickers had essentially groomed Amanda, offering her easy money in exchange for what seemed like harmless favors. First, they'd asked her to open bank accounts using fake identification. Then they'd asked her to sign documents she didn't understand. By the time she realized the true nature of their business, she was in too deep to escape. The plan to steal your house was their idea, Detective Santos continued. They needed a way for Amanda to generate a large sum of money quickly to pay off her debts. When she told them about your inheritance and your trusting relationship with your father, they helped her develop the refinancing scheme. So everything she did was orchestrated by these criminals. Not everything. Your sister made her own choices and committed her own crimes. But the trafficking organization provided the resources and expertise that made her schemes possible. Tom, Amanda's ex-husband, had been cooperating with the investigation. and his testimony revealed another disturbing aspect of the case. Amanda started acting differently about a year ago. He told Detective Santos during a recorded interview that I was allowed to hear. She became secretive about money, paranoid about being followed, and obsessed with other people's financial situations. When did you first suspect she was involved with dangerous people? When she started receiving phone calls at odd hours from people who wouldn't identify themselves. And when she began asking me detailed questions about my family's assets and my relationship with Gregory's family. Did she ever mention using the children as collateral? Tom's voice broke. Not directly, but she started talking about how the children were valuable assets and how she could use them to secure her future. I thought she was talking about custody arrangements or college funds. I never imagined she meant this. The investigation also revealed that Amanda had been planning to flee the country with the children once she got money from selling my house. She'd applied for passports under false names and had been researching countries with limited extradition agreements. If your grandmother's hidden inheritance hadn't surfaced when it did, Marcus told me Amanda probably would have succeeded in stealing your house, taking the children overseas, and disappearing forever. Uncle Paul had been working with federal investigators to track down other victims of the trafficking ring. Your case broke this investigation wide open, he explained. The evidence Amanda left behind is helping us identify dozens of other families who've been targeted. Are the children really safe now? The main operators of the trafficking ring have been arrested, and their financial assets have been frozen. But we're maintaining protective surveillance on your house for the next few months just to be safe. As the legal proceedings continued, Emma and Jake began to adjust to their new living situation. Sarah had moved in to help with childcare, and the children were responding well to having consistent, loving adults in their lives. Mrs. Patterson had essentially adopted herself as their honorary grandmother, teaching Emma how to bake cookies and helping Jake plant vegetables in my garden. The children were healing from the trauma of their unstable life with Amanda, and they were beginning to trust that they wouldn't be abandoned or endangered again. Derek had also stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. He'd gotten a steady job and was taking online classes to finish his degree. More importantly, he'd become a reliable uncle figure for the children, taking them to parks and helping with bedtime routines. I need to prove to them that not all adults in our family are going to let them down, he told me one evening as we watched the kids play in the backyard. Dad had been devastated by the full extent of Amanda's crimes, but he was also committed to making amends for his role in enabling her behavior. I should have seen the signs, he said during one of his regular visits. I should have protected you and the children instead of being manipulated by her lies. Dad, you were a victim too. Amanda is very good at manipulation. That's no excuse for putting my grandchildren in danger, but I want to help fix this Gregory, however long it takes. The extended family had rallied around us in ways that surprised me. Aunt Helen organized a neighborhood fundraising drive to help with the children's expenses. Uncle Frank set up college savings accounts for Emma and Jake. Even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to offer support. The truth about Amanda's crimes had initially shocked and embarrassed the family, but it had also brought us together in a common purpose, protecting the children and rebuilding the trust that had been damaged by years of manipulation. 3 months after Amanda's arrest, we received word that she'd been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for her role in the trafficking organization. The children would be able to visit her under supervised conditions, but they would remain in my care until they were adults. How do you feel about raising them? Sarah asked me one evening as we watched Emma and Jake playing board games with Derek and Mrs. Patterson. Scared, I admitted, but also grateful. They're amazing kids and they deserve better than what Amanda was giving them. Are you ready for the long-term commitment? I looked at Sarah, the woman who had stood by me through the entire crisis, who had helped expose Amanda's crimes, and who was now helping me raise 2 traumatized children. I'm ready if you are. She smiled and took my hand. I've been ready since the first day they arrived. 6 months had passed since that terrible day when I'd come home to find my father and a realtor standing in my backyard, casually discussing the sale of my house. As I sat on my back patio on this warm Saturday morning, watching Emma and Jake chase butterflies through the garden they'd helped me plant, it felt like looking back on someone else's life. The children had thrived in ways that constantly amazed me. Emma had started reading chapter books and was teaching herself to play piano on the keyboard Sarah had bought her. Jake had discovered a talent for building elaborate structures with blocks and was already talking about becoming an architect someday. Both children were excelling in school, making friends, and sleeping peacefully through the night without the anxiety and fear that had plagued them during their time with Amanda. "Uncle Greg, look what I built," Jake called out, pointing to an impressive tower he'd constructed using wooden blocks and toy cars. "That's incredible, buddy. Is that a parking garage for all the cars?" "It's a castle where all the good guys live and nobody can hurt them because the walls are really strong." Sarah caught my eye and smiled. Jake's play themes had evolved from scenarios involving danger and escape to stories about safety and protection. His therapist said it was a positive sign that he was processing his trauma in healthy ways. Dr. Patricia Williams had been working with both children twice a week since they'd come to live with us. She'd explained that children who experience betrayal by a parent often struggle with basic trust, but Emma and Jake were making remarkable progress. They're resilient because they have consistent, reliable adults in their lives now, she'd told Sarah and me during our last family session. "You're showing them that love doesn't come with conditions or dangers attached." Dad had been an integral part of their healing process. He'd undergone therapy to address his own patterns of enabling Amanda's behavior, and he'd become the kind of grandfather the children deserved. He visited 3 times a week, always bringing books or puzzles, always respecting the boundaries we'd established for their safety. I lost sight of what real family love looked like. He'd told me during one of our regular conversations, "I thought protecting Amanda meant giving her whatever she wanted, but real protection means holding people accountable for their actions." Derek had also transformed dramatically over the past months. He'd finished his degree in business administration and had gotten promoted to a management position at his company. More importantly, he'd become a stable, trustworthy presence in the children's lives. "I want them to know they have an uncle who keeps his promises," he'd told me. "I want to be the kind of adult I wish I'd been when Amanda was manipulating all of us." The legal aftermath of Amanda's crimes had been complex, but ultimately satisfying. The federal investigation had led to the arrest and conviction of 12 members of the trafficking ring, and their assets had been seized to compensate victims. Emma and Jake would have college funds waiting for them when they turned 18, funded by the criminal restitution payments. Amanda herself had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. She'd written letters to the children occasionally, and we'd worked with their therapist to determine how much contact was healthy for them. "Mommy made very bad choices that put us in danger," Emma had told me after reading Amanda's most recent letter. "But we still love her and hope she learns to be better." The children's capacity for forgiveness and hope constantly humbled me. They'd been betrayed by the person who was supposed to protect them above all others, yet they hadn't become bitter or angry. They'd simply learned to recognize the difference between healthy love and manipulative behavior. Mrs. Patterson had become an unofficial grandmother to the children and a source of wisdom for Sarah and me as we navigated parenthood. She'd retired from her part-time job to spend more time helping with childcare, and her presence in our lives felt like a gift from the universe. "Those children saved you as much as you saved them," she'd observed one evening as we watched Emma teach Jake how to braid friendship bracelets. "You could have become bitter about what Amanda did to you, but loving them has kept your heart open." She was right. The experience of caring for Emma and Jake had taught me things about myself I'd never known. I'd discovered reserves of patience, creativity, and protective instinct that I'd never needed to access before. Watching them heal and grow had healed something in me as well. Sarah and I had gotten engaged 2 months earlier, with Emma and Jake helping to plan the proposal. They'd hidden the ring in a treasure hunt game, leading Sarah through clues they'd written themselves. When she'd found the ring buried in our vegetable garden, both children had shouted, "Will you marry us?" in unison. "I love all three of you," she'd said through happy tears. "Of course I'll marry you." We were planning a small ceremony for the following spring, with Emma as flower girl and Jake as ring bearer. The children were excited about officially becoming a family, and they'd been drawing pictures of what our wedding would look like. The lakefront cabin that Grandma Rose had secretly left me had become our family retreat. We spent most weekends there, teaching the children to fish and swim, having campfires and telling stories. Emma had declared it the most beautiful place in the whole world, and Jake had decided that the lake was home to friendly fish who liked to hear him sing. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation had been my relationship with the extended family. Uncle Paul had been promoted to detective sergeant, partly based on his work investigating Amanda's case. Aunt Helen had started a support group for families affected by financial fraud. Uncle Frank had become a volunteer with children's advocacy organizations. "Your situation opened all our eyes," Aunt Helen had told me. We'd all been enabling Amanda's behavior without realizing it. Now we're learning how to have healthier family relationships. The whole experience had taught me crucial lessons about the difference between supporting family members and enabling their destructive behavior. I'd learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's well-being. I discovered that protecting yourself from manipulation actually enables you to better protect others, especially vulnerable children. I'd also learned that justice and compassion aren't opposites. They work together to create healing. Amanda needed to face consequences for her crimes, and Emma and Jake needed protection from her dangerous choices. But we could still hope for her recovery and maintain space for rebuilding relationships if and when she demonstrated genuine change. Tom had remarried and moved to a different state, but he stayed in regular contact with Emma and Jake through video calls and visits. He'd thanked me repeatedly for providing his children with the stability he hadn't been able to give them during Amanda's destructive period. "You gave them back their childhood," he'd said during his last visit. "They're not constantly worried and afraid anymore. They're just normal, happy kids." As I watched Emma and Jake playing in the backyard that had once been the center of Amanda's scheme to destroy my life, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey we'd all taken. Yes, the experience had been painful and frightening. Yes, it had exposed ugly truths about family dynamics and criminal manipulation. But it had also revealed the incredible resilience of children, the power of consistent love, and the importance of standing up for what's right. "Daddy Greg, will you play catch with us?" Jake called out, using the name he'd started calling me a few weeks earlier. "Absolutely, buddy. Let me grab my glove." As I joined the children in their game, Sarah appeared on the patio with a pitcher of lemonade and a smile that still made my heart skip. "How's our family doing today?" she asked. "We're doing great," I replied, and I meant every word. The truth was, Amanda's attempt to steal my house had led to something much more valuable than property ownership. It had led to a family built on honesty, trust, and unconditional love. It had shown me that protecting yourself from those who would harm you creates space to love and protect those who deserve it. Emma and Jake would grow up knowing they were wanted, treasured, and safe. They'd learn that love doesn't require sacrificing your own well-being, and that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect rather than manipulation or guilt. Most importantly, they'd understand that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. But they'd also know that people can change if they're willing to do the hard work of personal growth and accountability. As the afternoon sun began to set over our backyard, I realized that Grandma Rose had been right about so many things. Family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about the people who choose to love and protect each other consistently over time. Real strength isn't about getting what you want at any cost. It's about building something worth protecting. The house Amanda had tried to steal was still mine, but it had become something much more important, a home where children could heal, where love could grow, and where justice and compassion could coexist. As we cleaned up from our afternoon of play and headed inside for dinner, I couldn't help but think about other families who might be experiencing similar manipulation and abuse. Had you ever faced a situation where a family member tried to take advantage of your trust or generosity? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about setting healthy boundaries while still maintaining love and hope for family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Stories like these remind us that we're not alone in dealing with difficult family dynamics, and sharing our experiences can help others find their way through similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of protecting yourself so you can better protect others. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real families finding their way through difficult times to build stronger, healthier relationships. Thank you for joining Emma, Jake, Sarah, and me on this journey. Remember that every family has the potential for healing and growth, but sometimes that requires the courage to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. Here's to building families based on love, truth, and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and fear. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.